After her encounter with her husband that night, Mariam feared that Pastor Daniel would leave her with the children. However, days turned into weeks, yet Pastor Daniel didn't leave, but the tension in the house felt like a silent war. Mariam tried everything possible to please him. She cooked his favorite meal, keeping the house spotless, and even going above and beyond with the children, but nothing seemed to tell the coldness in his eyes. He remained distant and emotionally shut off, and though they lived together under the same roof, it was as if a barricade was formed between them. Hello, thank you so much for stopping by. If you are stumbling upon this video for the first time, kindly check the link in the description box to watch the first episode so that you can be able to understand the story properly. And please subscribe to this channel if you've not. Please support the growth of this little channel of mine by subscribing. Thank you so much as you subscribe. Now let's continue into our story. Mariam spent most of her days in prayers, hoping for some divine intervention. She attended church quietly, sitting at the back, no longer in the position of leadership she once cherished. People in the congregation whispered, and though no one knew the full truth, they sensed something was deeply wrong. Pastor Daniel's sermon became more fierce, as if he was preaching through his pain, trying to push the bitterness from his heart. His words were harsher than before, especially when speaking about sin and forgiveness. Mariam noticed this. Even the congregation noticed, and still the walls between them remained. One evening, as Mariam sat quietly with her two children, her daughter, little Sarah, looked up at her with innocent eyes and asked, "Mommy, why doesn't Daddy talk to you anymore?" The question hit Mariam like a punch in the gut. She forced a smile, though her heart ached. "Daddy and I are going through something right now, sweetheart, but everything will be fine," she assured her. Her son, David, who was more older and more perceptive, narrowed his eyes. "Did you do something bad, Mom? Is that why Dad is not talking to you? Or is that why Dad is mad at you?" he asked. Mariam's heart twisted. "Yes, he does, and that is why I believe he will forgive me too someday," she said. Even if her words fell hollow, she had to believe them for her children's sake and for her own sake. As rumors began to swirl more frequently, one Sunday morning, an elder in the church called Brother Chike approached Pastor Daniel after service. "Pastor, I need to speak with you," he said. Pastor Daniel, who was tired and weary from his internal struggle, nodded. "What is it, Brother Chike?" he asked. Brother Chike glanced around to make sure no one was listening. Then he began. "Pastor, the congregation is talking. People are beginning to ask questions about why Mariam stepped down from her leadership role. Some have even noticed that you two aren't as close as you used to be. Is there something that we need to know?" Pastor Daniel sniffed. "What are you suggesting?" he asked. "I am not suggesting anything, Pastor, but people are noticing, and as your brother in Christ, I think it is important you address it before things get worse," he advised. Pastor Daniel's jaw clenched. "There is nothing to address," he said. "My wife and I are working through some personal matters. That is all anyone needs to know now," he said. Brother Chike hesitated. "Pastor, I said this out of love. Be careful. Secrets have a way of coming to life," he said. And with this word, Brother Chike walked away, leaving Pastor Daniel standing in the church with his mind racing. He had always known that this day would come. The day where the cracks in his marriage would become too visible to hide. The church would demand answers, and he would have to face the truth. He thought to himself. One evening, as Mariam sat alone in her room, staring at a family photo on the dresser, the image of her and Pastor Daniel, smiling and happy, felt like a distant memory. The weight of her guilt, shame, and despair became so unbearable. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered a prayer. God, if you're listening, I need you more than ever. I am at the end of myself. I can't take this anymore, she prayed. The silence in the room was deafening. She had prayed for forgiveness. She had prayed for healing, for restoration, but it felt as if her prayers bounced off the wall. The distance between her and her husband was like a barricade that could never be breached. Suddenly, the door opened and Pastor Daniel stepped into the room. Mariam quickly wiped her tears, trying to compose herself. I need to talk to you, he said, his voice low but serious. Mariam's heart pounded into her chest. She nodded, and she was afraid of what was coming. Pastor Daniel sat at the edge of the bed, his face drawn with exhaustion. Mariam, I have been thinking, he said. Mariam remained silent, her hands trembling. I have been carrying so much anger, so much bitterness towards you for what happened. I can't even begin to describe the pain you have caused me. But I have also realized something. Mariam looked at him, her eyes widened with fear and hope. What is it? She asked. I've been holding on to this hurt for so long, trying to punish you for your betrayal. But in doing so, I have also been punishing myself. My heart had become so hardened, not just towards you, but towards God. I have preached about forgiveness, but I haven't been able to forgive my own wife, he said. Tears welled up in Mariam's eyes as she listened to her husband. I am not saying that things will go back the way they used to be, Pastor Daniel continued. I don't know if that is even possible, but I can't keep living like this. Holding on to this anger is destroying me. It is destroying us, he said. Mariam reached out, her voice barely a whisper. Does that mean you've forgiven me? She asked. Pastor Daniel hesitated, his eyes full of pain. I don't know if I'm fully there, but I am willing to give it a try for the sake of her children, for the sake of her marriage, and for the sake of her own soul. He said. Mariam sobbed, her heart flooding with relief. Thank you so much. Thank you, she said. In the days that followed, a fragile peace settled over the house. Pastor Daniel and Mariam began talking again. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments of tension. But for the first time in months, there was hope for Mariam. They sought counseling together, not just from the church, but from a professional therapist who could help them navigate the deep wounds in their relationship. Pastor Daniel struggled with trust, and Mariam struggled with shame that weighed heavily on her heart. But little by little, they began to rebuild, break by break, and prayers by prayers. Months passed, and though the scars of the past remain, Mariam and Daniel found a new rhythm in their marriage. It wasn't perfect, but was real. They learned to communicate better, to be honest about their feelings, and to lean on their faith In moments of weakness, Mariam stepped into a new role in church, not as the leader, but as a humble servant, working behind the scene and supporting her husband's ministry. She found healing in service, in helping others, and in trusting that God was working through her pain. Pastor Daniel, though still haunted by the betrayer, found solace in his faith, leaning on God to help him forgive and move forward. He no longer preached with anger, but with a newfound sense of humility and understanding of complexity of sin, forgiveness and grace. One night, as they sat down in their living room, Pastor Daniel reached out for Mariam's hand, and he said, "I've been thinking about what Brother Chike said about the secret coming to light." He said, Mariam looked at him, her heart racing. "We can't continue hiding this. Mariam, it's eating way both of us. I think it's time we tell the church, maybe not all the details, but enough to be honest about the struggles we have been through." Mariam's eyes widened. "But what will people think?" she asked. Pastor Daniel said, "I have always believed that as a pastor, it is my responsibility to live by example." Pastor Daniel began. His voice is steady but emotional. "But I am also a man, imperfect, flawed, and in need of God's grace, just like every one of you here," he said. The congregation listened in silence. "Today, I stand before you, not just as your pastor, but as a man who has walked through the fire. My wife and I faced struggle in our marriage, deep, painful struggle that nearly tore us apart. But through God's mercy, we are still trying to rebuild. We are still trying to heal and move forward," he said. Mariam's heart swelled up with mix of fear and pride as her husband spoke. "I am not asking for your pity or your judgment. I am asking for your prayers for my family, for my wife, and for myself." Pastor Daniel continued. "We are all sinners in need of God's forgiveness, and I believe that with His help, we can all overcome even the darkest of the night," he said. After the service, the congregation surrounded Pastor Daniel and Mariam with love and support. Some were shocked by the confession, but many moved by their vulnerability. It wasn't easy, to be honest, but their struggles. But in doing so, they found a new sense of freedom. Their marriage wasn't perfect anymore, but it was real, and in their honesty, they found healing, not just for themselves, but for others who were also struggling in silence. As they walked out of the church together, hand in hand, Mariam felt a glimmer of hope for the future. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like they were truly walking it together, and that was enough for her. The moral lessons in this story are: 1. Hidden struggles can destroy even the strongest of relationships. When left unaddressed, it can wreak havoc in one's life. Also, forgiveness is a journey, it is not a destination. Just reluctance to forgive immediately is understandable, but his willingness to try illustrates the power of God in healing relationships. Also, redemption is very possible even in the darkest moment. Mariam's story showed that no matter how far we fall, with grace and willingness to change, redemption is always within reach. Also, the caution is unresolved trauma. The story highlights the importance of addressing trauma early in life before they evolve into something bigger. Also, marriage requires constant nurturing and honesty. Mariam's marriage suffered because she tried to suppress her feelings, thinking that they would go away. True love required transparency and communication, which is very important in marriage. Finally, parents, try to be in your children's life. Don't leave their upbringing to nannies alone. Your child upbringing is your responsibility. What other lesson did you learn from the story? Kindly state it in the comment section below so that I can also learn from you too. Also, don't forget to like and share this video. Thank you. Please kindly subscribe to this channel if you've not, and put on your bell notification icon so that you'll be the first to know once a new video is posted on the channel. And until our next story, bye bye and God bless you. Please subscribe before leaving. Thank you.